Earlier today, Hogwarts Legacy got a new update, at least for some of you. This new update, as of right now, is only on the PC and Xbox. The devs clarified that due to a few extra issues we found, the PS5 patch will need to be pushed by a few days. This includes the fix for the Collector's Edition trophy. We're now targeting the PS5 patch for later this week. Thanks for your patience while we work on this. On the PC side, this update, although having a variety of fixes, was pretty small. It was only a 350 megabyte download, but ended up applying into over 30 gigabytes of patches, which the second part is going to take far longer to install, especially for some users, where that 35 gigabytes is going to take a really long time to install. Basically, what's happening here is you're actually downloading using your internet connection 350 megabytes, but then you have to apply that content to all of the files for the game, where you're actually applying it to around 35 gigabytes, which is going to be based off your hard drive speed. And if you have a slow hard drive, this might take a pretty long time. And it was a similar story on the Xbox side, with the update only being about 2.7 gigabytes in size total. This update contained a variety of bug and performance related fixes, some of which are exclusive to one platform or another. One of the biggest pushes with this was fixing crashes, and that was the most common fix we saw with this update. The big one was for PC, was a fix for a crash when playing certain cutscenes and cinematics. PC users have been plagued with lagging immediately following a cutscene and even crashes just when you start a cutscene. And based on some of the early reports, this patch has actually done a really good job at addressing this. Many of those cutscene related crashes for PC users are gone now. But even beyond that, regardless of platform, there were a ton of crash fixes in this update. And the early feedback is very positive on this front as well. Many users reporting far less crashing while playing Hogwarts Legacy in general. And even as a proactive step, they improved how crash data is collected on Xbox to help address even some of the more rare crashes that pop up in the future. So if you're having crashing problems with this game, this update should actually be really good for you. But the larger question in particular for PC players is around performance. Was stuttering or even lag addressed with this update? In the patch notes, there were a few things around this. We saw some changes in the shader compilation and performance. And before you ask, no, unfortunately on PC, when you load the game, you still have to load the shaders every single time. But what was a far more exciting patch note for PC users is resolved an issue with NVIDIA GPUs having lower frame rates compared to AMD. Although even if you are on the AMD side, don't fret. Earlier today, AMD themselves actually released a driver update that cites performance gains in Hogwarts Legacy specifically, so make sure you download that. But after extensively testing the performance and stuttering changes on PC, what I found is this patch makes it not that much better. Yeah, things are almost exactly the same or even worse for some people. So for context, I tested this latest update on a 4090 and 5900X, all the while using DLSS 2.0 at 4K resolution with ray tracing on. And one of the positives is it did feel like my raw FPS did improve somewhat. I was getting more FPS with this update, it just wasn't to a degree where it really mattered all that much. Like at some points, maybe I was at 70 FPS instead of 65 FPS, which is good. It's definitely nice to have that. And especially around Hogwarts, comparing to some old gameplay, I definitely had a couple of extra FPS here or there, but that also wasn't really the big problem with Hogwarts. While running around Hogwarts, you still get those massive lag spikes when going from one section to another, as well as door loading is still very much so alive and well. I have this game installed on a very fast NVMe drive, and I still get loading on doors while trying to go around Hogwarts. As I was slowly exploring within one area, I did have slightly more FPS that did feel pretty nice. But I feel like the real core issue here is a lot of people don't actually like running around Hogwarts because you get these huge lag spikes. And for me, at least, it has definitely made me use fast travel far more often than I otherwise would. And unfortunately, the story is exactly the same when it comes to Hogsmeade. I get a small FPS bump sometimes in Hogsmeade, but even on a 4090 while playing with DLSS 2.0, the entire time I'm in Hogsmeade, I am pretty much below 60 FPS. And even occasionally, I get severe drops into the 30s of FPS, which feels absolutely brutal when it happens. Especially considering I'm playing this game on some really high-end hardware. It feels like Hogwarts Legacy is attempting to use DLSS and FSR as a crutch for poor CPU optimization, and in this particular case, it simply isn't cutting it. And the same trend largely applies to the world overall, at least in my testing. I had a few more FPS here or there, but I still got those same FPS dives in the more taxing areas of the world. But one thing that was genuinely improved, or at least did feel genuinely better to me, was stuttering while playing in one place. I had this extended combat encounter within Hogwarts. The entire time, my FPS floated around 60, and at some points it definitely dropped under 60 FPS. But things felt far smoother here compared to some old builds of the game, even with my FPS dropping, because there was never an intense stutter. It allowed me to fully focus on combat without me really having to think about my game's performance at all, which is the ideal. And for some users out there, the combat-based performance is absolutely brutal, and on this front, I definitely noticed some improvements with this update, which is exciting. But that was just my experience. After testing this on my PC, I had a slight FPS bump with some less stuttering in general, but nothing was fixed completely. The larger issues are definitely still there. And unfortunately, early reports online are not all that positive. Many users are reporting lower FPS after this update, or even just similar FPS to what they had before with little to no improvement. Which, if you've actually played this update on PC, let me know in the comments. How have things evolved or changed for you? Although one thing that I think may be popping up here, especially with people reporting lower FPS, are some issues with certain workarounds or fan solutions to increase FPS. With so many people having performance problems with Hogwarts Legacy on PC, there's been a lot of fan workarounds, a lot of guides online on how to increase your FPS by editing files. And it seems like, at least for some users that have done that, this new update might conflict with that, or make some weird configuration that is actually leading to lower FPS as a result. So you may want to try undoing some of the changes you made before and see how that impacts things. Even in the patch notes themselves, WB Games mentions that you should not attempt to run the game in DirectX 11 mode, as it's not meant to be played that way. Although testing the game personally on DLSS 3.0, I did notice slightly lower FPS in Hogsmeade, but this wasn't really to a significant degree, occasionally dropping into the 70s after the update, where before maybe I was always sticking in the 80s, but again, at that high of an FPS number, losing 5 FPS didn't feel that bad. So if you're hoping for a comprehensive performance overhaul on PC, this is definitely not that. But there were also some performance bonuses on consoles, with the fidelity mode on console actually getting some upgrades. As of right now, we could of course only test this on an Xbox Series X, as the PS5 version of this update didn't ship yet, and yeah, it feels a tad smoother to play on the fidelity mode with ray tracing on my Xbox Series X. But it's one of those things where it's still not a lock at 30 FPS. I can run around Hogsmeade and immediately drop under 30 FPS on fidelity mode. And for me, it just feels so much better to play on performance mode compared to fidelity mode. I would still always pick performance mode even after this update with the improvements to fidelity mode. Although fortunately, even taking a step beyond performance, this update did have several positive changes for the game. There's a memory leak with global lighting that was addressed, so perhaps over longer play sessions, you'll notice less performance declines. One of the big ones was not being able to speak to vendors, and that was fixed. There's this issue in game where sometimes you would not be able to talk to a vendor after your initial conversation with them. And what this meant was it could block progress. It could actually be pretty big, like you not being able to buy a broom. Thankfully, that was fixed with this update. Another pretty nice one that was fixed was rewriting the last autosave slot in error. There is an issue in Hogwarts Legacy where some users are just outright losing their save game. And although it doesn't seem like that has been totally addressed, it does seem like this may help with that, in that you won't actually lose one of your last autosaves, which is definitely a positive. Quests would sometimes not progress properly after opening the mail fort. That was fixed. As well as the world randomly looking all stretched out for PC users was also addressed and fixed. And PC users even got a few additional options. You can now turn frame generation on even if you have DLSS disabled, and if you are using RTAO, it should look a bit better now after this update. But of course, as we work our way through the patch notes, there are things you are probably noticing that weren't fixed with this one. The voice bug is still alive and well, this being around your character's voice pitch. It's not the end of the world, it's not the biggest issue with the game, but it's definitely one of the most forward-facing issues, considering you encounter it literally right at the start of the game. There's an issue with some users not being able to get all 140 conjurable items, this being a larger issue because it is one of the achievements, and thus people cannot complete all of the achievements for Hogwarts Legacy. That was not fixed with this update. And even just kind of the weird one where sometimes the female player character looks weirdly bad. Like the male player character largely looks fine all throughout the game, but sometimes the female one just kind of looks weird. It's not really clear why that's happening, and it definitely wasn't addressed with this update. And honestly, that's just a few of the issues. There is a bug tracker that you can actually upvote bugs on, so I will have a link to that down below, and you can see there are hundreds if not thousands of bugs on here already. It seems like with this update for Hogwarts Legacy, the biggest move was towards trying to address crashing on a larger scale, which it seems like it is doing somewhat successfully, but not completely, and performance problems are definitely still there for PC users. For first patch, I would say this one is fine. There's some confusion around there being a day one update for this game. I think this patch makes it clear that that day one update came out already, probably came out before the early access even opened. And honestly, looking at Hogwarts Legacy right now, I do have some concerns that these PC performance issues aren't going to get fixed, or at least not get fixed anytime soon. Even in the best case scenario, this update only had a week or two of dev time. There wasn't a ton of work being put onto this patch, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, the game literally came out 1 week ago in early access. But with that in mind, you have to imagine if there was an easier fix towards some of these PC performance problems, it would have been done with this. They had enough time to address a small and easy fix, but it seems like whatever the problem is something much larger. CPU optimization being a big one, but in general with Hogwarts Legacy, there are just some bizarre performance problems. Like sometimes you just have your FPS plummet for seemingly no reason whatsoever, and it'll recover shortly thereafter like nothing ever happened. But did you know that Hogwarts Legacy also has some lesser known features, or even secret ones? You can check out this video to hear more about that, but otherwise, thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.